it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. If you're able, please join us for the pledge. Mrs. Clark will lead us, and Mrs. Boyer and Mr. Clark will give the invocation.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this opportunity we have to gather tonight as the governing board for the Sholo Unified School District. We are thankful for the moisture that we recently received upon our lands. We are grateful for Thou blessing us and helping our reservoirs and our aquifers being replenished, as it was very dire drought conditions that we had earlier in the spring. Thankful for that Thou has shed Thy mercy upon us. We're thankful for the conditions that we meet in tonight, that we live in a peaceful community, and that we have men and women who protect us, the first responders, our law enforcement, and our military personnel who protect and honor our freedoms. We ask that Thou please watch over them tonight. Bless them and protect them, help them to make it home safely to their families. We're thankful for our teachers and our administrative staff, our paraprofessionals, our custodians, and the wonderful people who work at the Sholo Unified School District. We're grateful for their sacrifices and for the hard and dedicated work that they put in on behalf of our students. We're thankful for the parents who raise these children, and we're thankful for our students as well. We ask that as we talk tonight and we deliberate, that we will be able to put the needs of our students at the forefront in our discussions and our deliberations. We ask that we might have Thy Spirit with us and have understandings beyond our own, that we might be able to work in a cohesive manner to solve issues and problems that face us and help do what's in the best interest for our students and for our teachers and for our faculty. And we are grateful for the many blessings which we have, and we ask for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Item 3.2, approval to change November board meeting date. It falls on Veterans Day, so would November 18th work for you guys? That's what's recommended.
That's fine with me.
Works for me.
Yeah, I can make it.
John, that works for you? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the board date change to November 18th.
I'll make motion to approve. Oh,
Go ahead.
did you make the motion?
She
Oh,
did.
I'm so
found out I
sorry.
could do it.
I missed
I
it.
found out I
Stepped
couldn't.
out of the norm.
I didn't hear you correctly. I'm so sorry.
Trying to help Brant out.
Yeah.
So motion, who gave a second?
Yes.
Yes, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3.3, Superintendent Report, Mr. Housley.
Madam President, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity. Before we get to listen to a little bit of information from our mental health department, and Dr. Rask will be sharing some information. And I just want to re-emphasize a letter that was sent out earlier in the week so that the public knows of the TikTok challenge that are out there. I have to share my appreciation for our students and our staff. I think we have high quality individuals, high quality children in our schools. And when given the opportunity to respond in a positive manner, I think we will see that happen. I'm confident that they will make the effort to set these challenges aside and not participate in these kind of things. But I do want to encourage parents to have those conversations. TikTok is something that can be used for a positive thing. It can be used for positive momentum and positive trends. But when it's set up like this challenge was, it could be very negative, and the consequences could be dire for students should they choose to participate. This month's challenge to slap a staff member is a felony, and that's something that the kids are thinking perhaps that it's just a fun prank and everyone can get a laugh out of. But aggravated assault, aggravated theft, those are all things that the police have let us know that when you do these kind of acts against the school system, that there are dire consequences. And I hope that we just take the chance to pause, to reflect, to have conversations with our kids. And then I know that the character of our community, our character of our kids will shine forward. I know Mr. Marchant shared with me that his staff took an opportunity to visit with some of the kids and just be real with them, and they saw some of the soap dispensers coming back and just randomly showed up or wherever. And so I think that's a positive thing. They realized maybe their conscious back to them a little bit and realized that it would be more beneficial. Just, this is our home. We don't want to damage or cause things that would ruin our home. So I just wanted to share that. And then with that, I'll give it to Dr. Rask and let him share a little bit about our mental health department.
Here in the mic or my back? You got it up here. Look at that. I can read this one. Thank you guys for the opportunity to come tonight, talk about our mental health program, some of the services we're providing at Sholo School District. I guess there is a PowerPoint that's being presented regarding some of the services and program stuff that we're doing at the school. The first one I'd like to address is the staff qualifications. In front of you, you see a robust list of different types of certifications and licensures of the staff that's providing the mental health services at your district, from doctoral levels of myself to longtime licensed professional counselors who have been doing that as a private practice, and then they came into a school system. So they bring a lot of robust experiences from the private sector into the school counseling. And then a lot of them have gotten their school counselor certificate through the grant program. And so they have a very diverse experience providing services to the kids at the Sholo School District, as well as providing support for the staff when needed. So any questions regarding the staff qualifications or the list of staff that you have on there? No? Perfect. Going on to core beliefs, it's a list, and this is kind of a general list. There's obviously a lot of stuff. It presents differently at different schools, but in promoting health and wellness district-wide while unifying proactive approaches. And what they're talking about on that is that instead of having a mental health program or working independently in each school, what we are working toward is becoming more diversified and unified. And so we're seeing stuff at the kindergarten level. These kids are getting services all the way up until 12th grade in the mental health areas. And there's counselors at each school to provide that transition from one school to the next. So there's not a lot of break-in services. Historically, we've had one or two on campus trying to cover all the mental health services, which really was ineffective. And I think you find a very effective mental health program by having counselors at each of the school districts or actually the school sites. We're looking into, sorry.
You want me to go back?
Thank you. It's individual and strength-based, working with the students on the strengths they have and trying to build on those to help be successful in the school setting. Positive belief in students and families, teaching restorative practices rather than punitive. Talking about how we keep kids in school. And so instead of just suspending kids out immediately with behavioral issues, we try to be more diverse and how can we help these kids stay in school by supporting or providing the services they need to mitigate any of the problems, emotional stuff that's struggling with, so we can keep them on the campus and continue the learning instead of just sending them home where it really doesn't fix anything. And the last one is integrative approach to counseling. Again, the counseling services we offer at the school is a bit different from a private setting, like you would find in like for Change Point, or you would find in a private setting. We work on keeping the kids in school, so we try to give them the skills to navigate whatever emotional issues they're having to be able to stay in school. So we're not like doing counseling sessions every single week like you would see in the private sector. We're trying to give the students the skills they need to get back to the classroom so they can learn, and if they need additional services, to be able to go to the community and get those services. How we work, these are some of the things that we provide in the school. Again, this is not a exhausted list. This is a preview of some of the things that we do provide. We do crisis response, coordination of care with outside agencies. We work very closely with Change Point, which is our local REBA. And we actually meet with them on a monthly basis, talking about client care and how we can have more of a global look on supporting services. That's what they're doing at Change Point, we can support in the school, and then we're providing data information to the counselors and to the psychologist that does a lot of the evaluations. Individualized education plan, team members, small group, social emotional instruction, vocational and career planning, Support success and learning, functional behavior assessments, and behavior intervention plans. Again, that has become more of a school unified or intervention plans we're trying to make look similar at each of the districts instead of, you got one plan that's at the junior high. By the time they move up to the high school, it looks totally different. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're trying to show a transition of services or care that goes from, again, K to 12. Brief targeted counseling, that's a little bit we talked about, trying to get the kids to resolve what's going on to get them back into the classroom. Professional development with staff, we do that through trainings. We just recently got done with the CPI training, which is the Crisis Prevention Institute, talking about how to engage with students in a non-violent or non-aggressive manner, trying to keep the kids settled without aggravating the situation. I know that the administrative group at the high school, or excuse me, at the district, we went through a training with them, as well as we've done with the parapros, and we're looking to expand that to do with the teachers as well, to give them some of those skills, working with the struggling students in the classroom. And then connection to resources. Again, we work with the community pretty closely in trying to keep up to date with all the community resources that are available to families and students. Exciting things that are happening, unification of counseling team. We meet monthly, talking about how we can, again, provide the best services for the students in the school. Monthly meetings with ChangePoint, coordinate care, district-wide risk assessment process. Currently, we have a self-harm scale that each of the schools is using. As we, if kids come in talking about self-harm, we have a way to evaluate them that is district-wide. It's been vetted through our attorneys and through mental health services to make sure that we're getting the best services and meeting the needs of the kids that are in the crisis. Increase in counseling services at each school site. Again, that's been a great thing the board's provided for our district, is we have a counselor at every school, be able to support the needs of the students. Diverse professionals perspective, and that is the wide range of services and experiences and whatever professionalisms that we have with our counselors. Exciting things that are happening, unification of the counseling team. Whoops, we just did that one. On to the next slide. Sorry. Do we have another slide?
Yeah.
There it is. Okay, increased community outreach. We try to continue to, if there's new counselors in the community, what are some other services we can get our kids involved with? We do a lot of community service stuff with the EDP programs, as well as trying to involve some career stuff with the communities and different services in the community, different businesses, family support and involvement. That's been a goal to continue to grow families. Historically, we've kind of here's school and there's family, and we don't do a lot of communication in between. We found that to be an area of weakness because we want to be able to meet with the families to increase the care for the kids and be able to meet the needs they have by not just stopping at school, but being able to move those services into the family. Staff well-being, again, we do consult services with staff. We do some training, embedded social emotional learning in all the settings and opportunities for students' connection and sense of belonging. I think as one of the biggest things we find with students, if they find somebody they have a connection with in the school setting, you find them, they're going to be a little more successful because they come somewhere where somebody wants them and somebody's excited to see them in the morning. And we work with our staff to try to create that environment that is welcoming and not, kids not disappointed that he's coming to school or worried. They're coming to a more positive environment where they're welcomed and thought of as being important. That relationship is extremely important for the success. Any questions? I think I hit my 5 minutes.
I have a very small question. You
Yes.
said there's a district-wide risk self-harm assessment that you use district-wide. There's an assessment that works for the little kids and the high schoolers, and it's
So-
the same.
Because we are not a
Assessment?
mental health services, we can't do an assessment that determines whether they're allowed to stay in school or not. It gives us information about what's going on, and then we're able to contact the parents and help the parents guide what the next step is.
Okay,
And that's something that can be used from any age.
gotcha.
Okay, does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
Have any questions?
No, I was glad to see the component of, staff well-being and making sure our staff is, feeling supported and that they know they have a place that they can call, and hopefully you can, or whoever can lead them into the right direction in getting the help that they may possibly need or assistance.
And that's a big part of what the counselors do, is just to be able to meet with the teachers and talk about problem kids and how we can do that. So that's
Thank
been-
you.
You bet.
Thank you, Eric.
You bet. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks to all the counselors that came to the study session to talk to us.
Thank you.
Item 3.4, call the audience. Paul Carruthers.
Good evening. I had a couple of issues, and I'm glad to see this on the agenda on 6.2, and I was reading some of the things that were on that, and my concern was about how our local school district addressed these issues of CRT jabs, AKA the vaccine for COVID, and masks. And I appreciate some of the answers that you gave me before the meeting. I was concerned about what the position of the local board was and how the schools were run. And I'm glad to see that, because it is kind of a controversial issue around different parts of the state and the country. And my concern was, I can see that this was addressing different new state legislative things, and my concern was how, because there seems to be a different push from other governments like the federal government in a different direction than what our state legislature has talked about. And I was concerned about how the board would react to those things. And I'm certainly am not envious of the positions that you are in on these certain issues. And I appreciate your consideration and hearing my concerns for our community. I don't have any kids or grandkids, but I'm very concerned about, because the education of our young people and what goes on in schools is very important to the whole community. It's important for me in hiring people and stuff. So appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
3.5, future agenda items. Anyone? No? Item 4.1, approval of overnight and out-of-state travel. Mr. Housley.
Madam President, for your consideration, there are several items here. Mr. Marchand is recommending the approval of Diane Abel and Alan Ramage to take 9 students to CTSO Fall Leadership Conference in Phoenix. Travel dates 11/8 to 11/9, funded through CTE and NAVIT. Mr. Marchand also recommends the approval of those same 2 individuals to take 12 students to the CTSO state competition and tour of U of A College of Education in Tucson. That's March 27th through the 30th. Same funding source. He also recommends that Corey Gillespie take 6 students to Skills USA in Williams. That's November 3rd through the 5th, funding through CTE, and then also recommends that Mr. Gillespie take 6 additional students to the Fall Leadership Conference in Phoenix, and those travel dates will be the 25th of October. CTE is funding those travel for your consideration and approval.
Move to approve the overnight and out-of-state travel as presented.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any further discussion? Motion passes. Item 4.2, approval of Sholo Unified School District Health Plan. Mr. Housley.
Madam President, members of the board, so policy JHD is already in policy. We're not approving a policy this evening. I just bring before you the chronic health plan. It is the exhibit used to carry out that policy. We've had this reviewed on a number of occasions by our attorney as we went through different revisions and other things. This is for students who have chronic health plans where it may preclude them from coming to school all the time or sometime, but it's because of health reasons, and they have to have this chronic health plan in place in order for them to not be in school and state funding to continue to come for that student. So this is the exhibit for that policy. I just bring for your consideration this evening.
Move to approve the chronic health plan form that's been outlined and placed on our agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any further discussion? Motion passes. Item 4.3, approval of TSI tutors. Mr. Hosley.
Madam President, members of the board, as you are familiar, TSI is a grant. It's given to address the needs of the schools that qualify for that grant. And that requires some teachers to help with the students that would qualify under that grant. And they're low performing. They're performing in the bottom 5% of the state, and so these are students that need some additional help. And for your consideration, the TSI tutors at the junior high, Don Tomlinson, Lana Howard, and Jenny Murray, for your consideration.
I'll make motion to approve the TSI tutors as presented.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any further discussion? Motion passes. Item 5.2, approval of, 5.1, approval of resignations, retirements, and terminations.
For your consideration and resignation, Shaylee Paz, junior high paraprofessional, Julie Plum, certified substitute, Harry Halcomb, certified sub, Lorena Marchant, certified sub, Lonnie Gangloff, Whipple Ranch Food Service. For your consideration, there is also, let me make sure I'm on the right one here. Yes. I think that would be it for your consideration this evening, Madam President.
Full motion we approve.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Oh, can I say one thing? There's one resignation in here that's just a screenshot of a text message, maybe a little more context from who it's from and what school and stuff on future ones.
That has it.
I can figure it out.
It's labeled. It's labeled in the board docs.
Is it in there? Okay.
Yeah, whose that is. Oh, noted. Thank you.
Yeah, Brandy. I'm waiting for Shad.
5.2.
Yeah. Already rattles off.
Oh,
5.2.
you already said
Mhm.
5.2? I thought we were back on 5. Sorry. New hires, Samantha Phillips, NAVIT secretary, Roger Bout, a food service worker, Sean Roberts, a food service worker, Tracy Thornton, food service worker, Jessica McNeil, para 1 at the junior high, 28 hours a week, and Jennifer Spradlin, para 2 at the junior high, at the high school EDP, and that was a transfer. I'm sorry. For your consideration this evening.
Full motion we approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any further discussion? Motion passes. Item 5.3, approval of substitutes. Mr. Hosley.
We are excited to have them coming in the door.
Pouring in.
This is nice to have this Jennifer Duenas and Tony Werder, Lindsay Atran, and then classified Jody Garrett and Cinda Logan for your consideration.
Full motion we approve.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 5.4, approval of stipends, volunteers, and event workers. Mr. Hosley.
You'll see in here a number of those for your consideration. Jay Brimhall, assistant, volunteer assistant coach, also a volunteer event driver. Eric Hanchett as ESI, and Marshall Pratt. They were working full time in fiscal year 2022, and so we asked that those retention stipends be paid to them. Event workers: Brianne Garvin, Jamie Clark, Regan Roach, Heather Stahl, and Becky Field as event workers. Also in that agenda item, you will note approval payoff contract work for teachers working on SSIP, Ida Carpenter, Reagan Roach, Corinne Anderson, Michelle Shoup, and those at $30 an hour, the hours to be determined. Those are similar to the PSI, but it's a different, it's SSIP, not PSI. So for your consideration this evening.
Motion to approve stipends, volunteers, and event workers as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 6.1, discussion and approval of ASBA bylaw change proposal.
Madam President, I think, Mrs. Boyer, do you have some information on this? You, from your, did they talk about this at your representative meeting?
If they did, I don't really remember.
They've been sending us a lot of
They've been
emails about
sending
it.
us,
They've been
yeah,
sending a lot
I
of-
received an email, I think it was from Heidi Vega
Yeah.
at ASPA. And what they are trying to do is add another position to the board of directors for ASPA. Typically, well, in the past, it's been Hispanic and Indian. Through the caucus, 1 year it would be a Hispanic representative, the next year a Native
It's every 2
American.
years.
Yeah, and there would be a switch. So now they're trying to add another position so that they can both be represented at all times. And so that's what they're asking us to approve. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve an additional seat on the board of directors to include both Native American and Hispanic representatives.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No, motion passes. And Brandy, you'll put the vote in for us? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Item 6.2, discussion and approval of first reading of policy advisory 712 through 715. Mr. Housley.
Madam President, members of the board, as you are, as you've been following perhaps the legal status of masks and vaccines, I don't know what you call it, the non-mandate law. I don't know what it was called, but the law that was in place and was supposed to take effect here at the end of September, the judge found that it was unconstitutional. I'm interested to see, maybe Mr. Clark even has some ideas from his other hats that he wears, but I'm interested to see as this moves through, because what challenges there are. The legislature could go ahead, I guess, and consider it when they start their session again as a single item.
Mhm.
The reason why it was considered unconstitutional is because it was lumped into one single, which they're supposed to be single, but they put 5 things in there, and there's other things that were declared unconstitutional.
They also included it in the budget, so it was more of a procedural problem that was ruled unconstitutional than the content of the actual legislation. So yeah.
So what you have in front of you right now is a reflection of that change in law again, and if it should be argued and found opposite, we would then go back and change those again. But these are the policy advisories from ASBA, and they're for your consideration for your first reading this evening. Maybe by the second reading, it will change.
Yeah.
So,
I think this is one of the reasons it's useful to have ASBA, because I wouldn't want to be having to keep track of this or something. A lot.
for your consideration this evening.
I'll make motion to approve policies advisory 712 through 715 for first reading.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.1, bond update. Is that you or Mrs. Beaker?
That would be me. Do you have that on your
Yeah, are you ready?
sheet there? Yeah. So we just want to wrap this up. We, as noted, we have the bond funds have been expended with the remaining balance of $67,625, and we currently have anticipated using those funds to assist in purchasing a digital marquee that would go right in front of the auditorium there, kind of on Old Linden. And then there's some window blinds at Nicholas and Linden. So those would be some window treatments to update the blinds that are there. So that would take the rest of that money that's available there. But just kind of give an overview for you as far as what the bond was spent on and what brings us to this concluding moment, I guess. Ms. Beecroft, if you will go ahead, just a reminder of what the bond docket said as far as what it should be spent on: student safety, transportation, technology, and facility improvements. The budgeted items for those particular those particular areas were as outlined, for a total of $10 million in bond proceeds that went to those things. 1.4 to student safety, 1.7 transportation, 1.6 in technology, and the facility improvements was just over 5.2 million. The very first thing that we were able to do is to purchase some yellow buses and some white fleet. We got 10 or 11 yellow buses and two white fleet there, and we got 2 different sizes of buses to see which ones best suited us. As far as the white fleet were concerned, the yellow buses, we got some transit buses, and then we got some of the big pushers with the underneath carriage, so that we can those seat about 85 students plus the luggage underneath. So we have both of those were there. It was really nice. I think it's been nice in times when we've had some inclement weather. Our buses were equipped with chains, not the kind of chains you have to get out and go underneath the bus and put them on, but they hit a button and it puts the chains on. When they don't need them anymore, they hit a button and it takes the chains off. It's super fun as they move down the road, and they've come in handy as we've done that. Next slide.
How many miles have the new buses put on them in 3 years?
I don't know. Mr. West, do you know how many miles?
That's it?
So pre-bond, just so you knew kind of where we were, we had 22% 0 to 5. Most 44% were 6 to 10 years old. We had 17% that were 11 to 15 years old, and 16 to 20 years old, they were 17. We had 17%. The aging of our buses changed. Just a reminder, we did discuss, as we talked about this with the bond committee, and then also as the board considered this was early on in the bond. So some of you might have just remembered those discussions happening. They weren't sitting on the board at that time, but we knew that going into this that we would have to start the budget capital to replace the older buses. The top end, we got rid of the real old buses, but that still left us with 17% of our fleet at 11 to 15 years. Those will need to start to rotate out. And there comes a point where you can't really use them anymore. They won't be certified by DPS. So we're going to have to build into our capital budget over time those expenses as we come in. A bus right now, they run about, correct me, about $175,000, $186,000 per bus. So they're not cheap. They take a long time to come in. So it's good that we know that, so we can start to prepare. It would be wise to do one a year or one every so often. You don't want to order 5, but we just want to take our time and make sure that we're replacing them and getting rid of the older ones as we bring the new ones on board. Okay. These are some visions of those buses. We went with Bluebird, except for our small buses, our special need buses. Those were a different type of bus because they met a higher safety standard than the Bluebird bus did, and they were just as economic. So we went with those were, I can't remember the brand. Sorry, just lost it. Okay, go ahead. So just a reminder, one of the things with facilities and safety was to secure the front entries, front entry pieces. So at Whipple Ranch, you'll notice here on this slide, part of the scope of Whipple Ranch, the access road behind the bleachers at the football stadium, that was part of the scope within the Whipple Ranch plat there, but not technically Whipple Ranch. The new parking out there, we changed, we had to delete that from the projects as far as this map's concerned, but we did bring the traffic around, and there are some parking areas out there in that turnaround area. So those were the considerations for that portion of it, and then continue to go down the road there. As you walk into Whipple Ranch, all of you are probably familiar. When you walk in, the initial corridor was wide open. You could go and get lost in all the corridors if you wanted to. Now you go and you have to go into the front office if you're going to go enter the school or be allowed to go in through those doors. This is just some construction. There used to be doors into classrooms right off the main entry, and those doors aren't in there anymore. They were brought inside the secure vestibule. Okay. There's just an image of the front as you enter in, and then through seen back into the doors. Okay. Next. Nicholas Homestead, same thing. We updated the front office, created a secure entry, put some secure things over the windows so it's a one-way view in. Go ahead. You'll just see the construction there on the front entry. And then continue through. Now the front desk is there. They allow buzz in, and then the old office area there is now a meeting room where they have a large conference table where they can hold their IEP meetings or other things that they might meet in there. In fact, we do this year we're rotating our administrative meetings, weekly administrative meetings, and last month we spent our time in Nicholas Homestead, and that was a nice little place to meet, and it was good. Okay. You'll see there the lighting. They told us, they said that cougar's been there for a long time. Some people acted like it was the first time they saw it because it was nice and bright up in there.
Bigger in there with the lights, even though it's the same
And
space.
but it was fun. And this was right after construction. Mr. Hall has it looking a lot nicer right now, and all of his staff in there. There's nice pictures and things kind of to show the historical nature of Nicholas Homestead. Linden might have been the biggest transformation. They were completely wide open and sitting right on the 260, and that was worrisome. So go ahead and you'll see that we had to extend part of our issue, and it hasn't resolved it 100%, but it resolved a lot of it. Is we had traffic all way back into the 260 for pickup. Still goes out there a little bit, but it's not as far as it was before. They do have a pickup circle and a drop-off circle now. They have additional staff parking in the parking in front. That was something that was really needed. You'll notice in that plan, that kind of a plan, they also enclose with block walls the ends of the building so that it's not just free access to the center. And we moved the front office out to the front parking lot so that people can now enter a secure area. And the front office is the first interaction that they have, not a kinder classroom. So that was beneficial. Okay, go ahead through those pictures. The junior high, I guess outside of Linden, maybe the next drastic transformation. The office was in the center of the campus. That's how they used to build them. Bring everyone to the heart, right, of the campus, and that's where you wanted everyone to gather and everyone to be. And with recent, things in our recent history, the last 10, 15 years, the push has been to have the offices on the outside. So that's the first entry. And we moved the front office out to Cougar Lane. That's where they enter. We added a parking space there. So now they enter a secure place, and the first interaction they have is with the front office. We also moved the administrative offices there and added a conference room so that they would have that as a piece of that too. Okay, there you see the transformation. We do have air conditioners and heaters that were all upgraded at the junior high. I do have to tell you, hats off to our tech guys. I did not know that IT hackers out there would hack the EMS systems for air conditioning units. But ours were all hacked, but our guys found that out. They were the first ones to identify it. And that was a report thing that we reported to the trust. And then they pushed that out to training to the other districts. But ours were all hacked. They were communicating with places in Denmark and wherever. It was pretty much a amateur hack job, though. They got in, but I think they were just waiting for openings, and it never happened. They never got an opening, but they were communicating with other servers off that they weren't supposed to be. And our guys found that with some of the new security systems that they put into place, and that was fun to have them work through that. But that's been one of the downfalls, and it's caused our systems to be up and down and all over the place, and that's part of the issue that we found as we went through there. But those were upgraded. Go ahead. You'll also notice as we go through here some of the other things that were upgraded. When we get to the technology, I'll talk about those. Go ahead. So lighting and water efficiencies, all of our, one of the things, water is a big savings. They actually say that water efficiency is more of a savings than putting LEDs everywhere. So we did both. All of our sites were upgraded with LED lights. They turn on and off. Like when you walk in, most of them are motion sensors. Sometimes if you're sitting quietly in your classroom or your office, the lights go off and you have to wave your hand to turn them back on, but they are supposed to do that. You'll see in the gym, this is just to show you the LED lighting. That's what it used to look like before all the floods.
It's nice.
And then the LED lighting in the hallways. Again, that's what it looked like before floods. So we keep going down to 2025. Go ahead. The parking lots, these are some of the areas that were probably the most noticeable with our LED lights and in our parking lots and in our facilities to help deter some of the nooks and crannies that people would hide in and do interesting things. Okay, let's go to the next one. Some of the SFB projects, just wanted to throw these in because sometimes as a reminder, there are a lot of SFB projects that weren't under the bond. Sometimes people might forget that, like the Whipple Ranch roof replacement, that was SFB, that wasn't bond. There are others that are like that were part of the SFB that weren't going to be part of our bond dollars, but it did enhance our bond. We did meet our goal to expand it over $15 million. So we took our 10 million combining with SFB projects, we are over $15 million worth of upgrades or construction that we were able to do within the district. Okay, go ahead. Technology projects, next one. I missed those slides up. That's what it was. All classrooms have been updated with TVs, as you saw, document cameras. Teachers had new Chromebooks. We are also working right now with ESSER dollars to upgrade those again. They typically have a 4, maybe a 5-year lifespan. We're going to be working on upgrading all the devices for all the teachers throughout the district with the ESSER money. The district, as a result of the bond, it put us well on the track on the pathway to a 1-to-1 student to device ratio. We're pretty close. I think there's some outliers there that we still need to just finish up, but we're really close to being 1-to-1 devices to students, and so that's great. Additional upgrades have been made to enhance the wireless network, increase bandwidth, and to strengthen the backbone of the network. Those are all in things. We upgraded the phone system, which has allowed us to upgrade the intercom system. No longer are we reliant on the proprietary Bogan systems. As those started to degrade, we had to call them and they had to send their service techs because they were proprietary. Now our intercoms and our lockdowns and our alarms, those are all ran through our phone system, and they can be locked down, as we found out, from any phone in the district. We've practiced pretty well on that. We're about 90% complete. We haven't completed that project at the high school yet, but they are working. As Mrs. Clark said, sometimes the little, what did she say, the gnomes come in and they fix things, and all of a sudden you have an intercom there that you didn't know you had, because we have guys working in off hours from 2 o'clock in the morning until teachers come, and then they break off. They have to run all the wires, all the cables to get it to the speakers. The schools that have them up, they're plenty loud. In some areas we've asked, can we buffer them down, but they actually censor the sound in the rooms, and then they meet the standard decibel ratings based on the sound that's in there. So they might elevate higher if it's louder, or a little bit lower, but there is a range that they're supposed to be in it. And it is loud. It's kind of like a fire alarm. It isn't fun with your ears, but this upgrade allows us to do that. There is also, as we finalize this and do some training, everyone will be able to lock down from an app on their phone, should they choose to be able to do that, which is good. When we look at things like Aztec High School in New Mexico, one thing that saved their school shooter incident from being more catastrophic is everyone in their school had the opportunity, if they saw something, to lock the school down, and it was a custodian that locked the school down as they walked up on the perpetrator. They put the school in lockdown and then secured themselves, and that saved a lot of lives. So we're hopeful that this will enhance our ability to do that too. Next. This was some of the current things that we were waiting on. Most of these have been done with the exception of weatherization. Linden and Nicholas are still with the SFB. They're still in design. I didn't really know until all of these projects that you have to design paint and weatherization, but I guess there's architecture to it. Maybe it's just designed so they could have the scope so they could bid it. I don't know what it is, but it's rather interesting. We're still awaiting some things with some of our SFB projects. We did push a pause button on some of them to pull them back because we had a lot of them in the docket, and we needed to slow down so we could prioritize and move forward with it. Okay, go ahead. That should wrap it up. Again, we have about $64,000 remaining, and we would desire to use that for the things that I mentioned. And that kind of wraps up. This would be the wrapping up of that bond. Any questions?
I do. So I just wanted to hopefully hope that there's going to be a precedence in making sure that we are making sure all of the school sites are safe, secure, and that cameras are operable, intercom systems are working 100%, and that, you know, we have our security systems in place. And I think priority needs to be given to that first and foremost. You know, I'm concerned. I don't know if all the cameras are working in all school sites that we do have cameras, but we do. I think it's an important thing to make sure we have in place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thanks, Mr. Hosley. Item 7.2, approval of City of Sholo IGA.
Before we go forward with this, I'm going to declare conflict on this because I'm on the city council as well as the school board. So I think it would be, I'm going to declare conflict on both governing bodies. So I'm not going to participate in the discussion or in the voting for it.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. These are, we usually approve this IGA with the city for 5 years. You'll note that it does expire at the end of this month. So that's why we're bringing it before the city. Will consider this in their meeting on the 19th, I believe it is. But there were a few changes. I'd like to say that we really appreciate our partnership with the city. They do great things for us, and we think that it's reciprocal. I think we provide some things for them, and this IGA just kind of lays those things out. And that includes our relationship with our SROs. We were jointly maintaining the marquee at Burger King. I think it was a mutual discussion. Well, I know it was. We were all there and talking about the marquee and its effectiveness. I think what you'll see is that marquee is actually going to move from Burger King. You really only can see it when you get to the stoplight move going west, and you really don't pay attention to it when you're going east. And so it's in an awkward place. And we all agreed that the upgrades that were purchased a couple years ago really never came out the way any of us had intended they would. So I think it's in the best interest that part of it got removed from the IGA, and I think we all agreed on that portion. So that's a change in the IGA. You'll notice there that over the last 5 years, we used to use some of the city, the old school campus over by Nicholas Homestead. We used to have some agreements there. Those we're no longer using those buildings for wrestling. And so you'll see those abstracted from that as far as that's concerned. And let me just make sure we got everything else. I think that would be the gist of the changes of the agreement. But I would ask that you would approve the IGA with the city as the amended changes.
I'll make motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement between the district and the city of Sholo, and thank the city of Sholo for what they do for our school district.
Second.
I'll second that on both counts.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any further discussion? Motion passes. Item 7.3, approval of procurement of over $100,000. Mr. Housley.
I'll let Mrs. Beecroft explain why this comes before you.
Okay, so any procurement that's over $100,000 has to be board approved. So one of the projects or purchases that is in the queue, I guess, like immediately, is using the SR2 funds. The district proposes the purchase of 9 new additional, the White Fleet, the short 14-passenger athletic buses, and 1 wheelchair accessible athletic bus, totaling $699,000 and some. Sean or Mr. West is here if he wants to come up and kind of go over. I know the admin met as a team, and this was one of the things that was discussed as a need for the district with some of the pending issues in school finance. We may adjust, but I'll let him.
Okay. Madam President, members of the board. So back in July, when you guys all met with Mr. Housey and then we all met with you, it was discussed about the White Fleet where a need was presented that currently we have 2 vans. We have a 2010 12-passenger van and a 2005 8-passenger van. The 2010 just received a new engine, and the 2005 is in excess of 250,000 miles. Our third White Fleet vehicle that we have is a Suburban, a 2003 Chevy Suburban that also has in excess of 250,000 miles. Part of the bond is we were able to purchase 2 of the 15-passenger school bus body vans. One of them is a 2018 with 39,000 miles on it currently, and the other one's a 2019 with 42,000 miles. And with the driver shortage that we have, we're continually sending these vehicles, and we're sending them to Texas, we're sending them to California. And with what we currently have, it's not safe to send our kids anywhere off this mountain with the current White Fleet that we have, with the exception of the 2 2018 and 2019. We looked at our local dealerships to see if we could find other vans. Due to the pandemic or whatever is causing the issues, people are looking for vans for the last 5 months. I was at Sholo Ford this morning because we got word that there might be some White Fleet there. I went up to the dealership and they received 6 2022 pickup trucks, which won't serve our students. So, and we don't have the $60,000 per vehicle to receive those. We've looked on Enterprise, because they sell vehicles as well. We looked at major dealerships throughout the nation. We can buy a Suburban or a van in either Missouri or California. We can't currently find anything in the state of Arizona that we could use as a school district. So with that issue, we reached out to the 3 bus manufacturers to see what it would take to get some 15-passenger school bus body vehicles. We received 2 quotes, from one from Kansas State and one from RWC. The third manufacturer, Ash Auto Safety House, they're between salespeople for us, so that we did not receive a quote from them. And we went with the RWC quote because it was less expensive than Bluebird. They're the same buses. They are school bus manufactured bodies, so they have all those black ribs on them, which is the impact points. We asked for 9 of those with 1 special needs, just so that we can transport our activities. I did some numbers today. In the month of September, just for information, so from September 1st to September 30th, we had 50 trip requests. Out of those requests, we sent 19 of those trips with White Fleet, and 31 of those went on a school bus. We're using the school buses as much as we can, but there's going to be those times, like today, for an example, I was in Round Valley. I had to take the football to Round Valley to drop them off. Another bus went to go pick them up because of our staff shortages. We have 3 White Fleet vehicles in St. John's right now. And then we sent 4 buses for the other two teams, one in Rand Valley, one in Snowflake. And had we had the availability to other White Fleet, then we wouldn't have had to do that. From October 1st until today, we have had 30 trip requests. 26 of those we've sent with yellow buses, and 4 of them with White Fleet as of just today. So that's the numbers that we're getting for the trips, and we want our kids to be as safe as possible, which is the reason that we're asking for this expense.
Are these the vans or the white activity buses?
They're the white activity buses.
Okay.
And who can drive them?
Anyone. So you just have to have a driver's license and then the 39-month MVR, which there's been a lot of discussion of liability. Anyone that's been approved by the district to be a coach, teacher, or a volunteer that goes into one of those vehicles is covered by the school insurance trust. As long as we have that MVR, which they send that to me, and we look at them for DWIs, aggressive driving, stuff like that. And if they have any of those things, suspended licenses, we don't let them drive. So anyone that drives, if they're in an accident, it's just like a regular school bus driver. If they're driving and get in an accident, they're not liable unless they did something that was illegal.
Any more questions?
And we feel like we need 10 of them?
So the 9, when I was at Round Valley today, I just kind of, as I was driving out of their parking lot, they currently have 9. And they're a very small district. And I don't know how many trips that they get, but the amount of trips that we take, I know the EDP class takes little trips around town. The athletic departments go out of town. Teachers can use them to go until we can get another option. And we did look at enterprise fleet services a couple of years ago, but it wasn't for necessarily these kind of vehicles. They're for like suburban and stuff for staff. So until we can get something for staff, they can use those vehicles.
Because that's not even 2 per school. No.
They also will, it also makes, when we talk about transportation for summer school and other things, we ran the big yellow buses all summer. We could run these, be more efficient. They're gas, for the most part, they're gas vehicles, they're more economic. Whereas a bus gets 6 to 8 miles a gallon, these are going to get a little better. I mean, they're not 25, right? But they're still a little better than 6 to 8, and you don't have to have a CDL driver to drive. So there's a lot of upsides that we can use these to put some miles on. As you can tell, just the two over the last couple of years of 40,000 miles apiece, that they're getting a lot of use, a lot of miles.
They get a lot, and then it would also help us that amount. We get McKinney-Vento students. We don't have a vehicle to necessarily go pick them up with. We can use these White Fleet vehicles instead of a school bus to go pick up our McKinney-Ventos, because it doesn't matter if a student goes homeless today that lives in Sholo and they end up being in Round Valley. I have to legally send someone to Round Valley every day to pick them up, and having these additional White Fleet that would give us that capacity would be helpful. Plus, it's for the future.
Yes.
I have a question. Does the 3 written quotes meet our procurement code, or are we going off state contracts for these?
So all 3 of the manufacturers are on state contract, but
Okay.
we do get the 3 quotes anyways, just to compare the app.
Yeah, it's usually based off of a dollar amount. For this dollar amount, I didn't know if we'd have to go out to bid or not. So, but it sounds like we could just go state contract and it works. So,
One thing that Mr. West was sharing with me today about these are 10-month outlays. So we're not like you can, I know one of the misconceptions with the bond was like we would go down to Hatch Toyota and pick buses, right? They have to manufacture them, so it's at least 10 months before we can even see one of them on the ground.
And with hundreds of other districts doing exactly the same thing with the ESSER money, that's why you can't find passenger vehicles. It's ridiculous. But I would just add that we were asking for the approval for the 10. After we go over the AFR, there's a good possibility after we rehash out, I guess, where we sit with the ESSER funds, we may end up maybe going with 6 or 7, but
And maybe that's something we could budget for out of capital in future years, like 1 a year or
yeah.
whatever.
So we're asking for the full for the 10, but it wouldn't go up, it would just maybe go down depending on what the finances look like.
We felt like we wanted to do that because if things work out good and we were able to order them, then at 10 months we put in the order and it's going. But if we don't, then we put in the order for whatever. Let's say we only brought 6, and then we're like, oh well, we can do 9. Now we have to wait another month,
Right.
and then come back, and that might delay even further. So we just want to be proactive. Likelihood is that we'll reduce that number, but it definitely we won't exceed.
You want?
This is for your approval this evening, Madam President.
All motion we approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any further discussion? Motion passes. Item 7.4, approval of fiscal year 2021 annual financial report. Mrs. Beecroft.
Okay, so I've made a presentation to kind of condense all of the data in the Excel file. We can walk through that, and then any questions that you have, anything you want to spend more time on, certainly we can. So basically what the annual financial report is after all year of setting our budget. So this would be for the school year that we just finished, the 2021 year. We send our entire accounting records, and this is what it pulls together, is the annual financial report. So it's kind of, I guess, the conclusion to all of the budget meetings and budget data. So here I've tried to put together, we have the budget balance history. As I alluded to, we'll talk about the COVID, the relief funds, the total that the district has received, the total that we've spent, and then this year even what we've encumbered. I know Mr. Housley shared some information earlier about the aggregate expenditure limit, so we'll go over that a little more. And then kind of next steps, our goal with where we want to go. So the key.
Before you
Sorry,
move
go
on,
ahead.
I just want to express, as we're going through there, there's 3 things that I really want you to kind of look for as threads through this. There's 3 what the Auditor General would classify as high risk behaviors that we're trying to eliminate from our budget process. And those things I want you to see is our efforts in those directions, and I think you'll see threads of those efforts as we go through this. But the 3 of them are this. First high risk behavior is moving capital to M&O. That is, it's acceptable, you can do it, but it's a high risk behavior because you're sacrificing capital needs, right? So that's a thing that you want to pay attention to. The second thing is operational reserves. You should look to have an estimated 25% of your operating budget in operational reserves. Historically, that's been pretty bleak, not very much at all, if any, in our operational reserves. So that's been high risk behavior that in a catastrophic situation would lead to some bad things, right? So we want to make sure we're addressing operational reserves. The third thing that we're really trying to eliminate from our high risk type of budgeting behavior would be our leave plan is a pretty nice leave payout. So if you were to leave the district, it's a pretty nice compensation when you separate and you move, whether you retire or whatever. All of our employees qualify for that, every one of them. The problem with that is that we are high risk behavior is if you don't have set asides to cover the potential leave, right? So the potential leave for us is 300 employees. But how you narrow that down, because that's impossible. You can't take and put aside all amounts for 300 employees if they all should leave. Who are the highest percentage of people that might leave? And what is that payout? And you should be able to reflect that in your budget, in your budgeting. So these are things that are considered high risk behavior if you're not doing those things, or if you're doing it in the case of moving capital to M&O. So look, as we go through this, just kind of reflect on those 3 things, and I think you'll see that and Mrs. Beecroft has captured it pretty well.
So he pretty much covered that slide. So in trying to grasp, and I've talked about this before, the history of our district and the overwhelming task of trying to put it back together, so to speak. I have been consulting with an ASBO level consultant. He consults for ASBO. He does seminars with ASBO and ADE. He's very well versed. I think majority of the districts in our area also use him. He's phenomenal. So I'm working with him on all of this. So I think it's pretty amazing that I have access to someone that really, really knows. He's actually the business manager or CFO for Tolleson Unified, which is ginormous. So he does an amazing job, and he's also we see him in all the state circles. He speaks. So I'm just he reviews everything that I'm doing. I send it off. Constantly in contact with him. So kind of here's just a snippet of our budget balance. I know we've already talked about this previously, but in really sitting down with him, these are some of the things that we mutually agreed on. So I put in writing. If he were to just look at this and not know anything about our district, he would presume that we're not financially solvent over the last 4 to 5 years. 2018, if we were to be coming off that year into the conditions we have right now, we'd be closing the school. We don't have anything in reserve, and what's actually almost $500,000 in the hole. So the district is essentially living paycheck to paycheck. If we were to, for some reason, not get our monthly payments from the state, or if they were delayed, we would have a severely hard time making payroll. And we've experienced some of those things in the last couple of years. So as Shad mentioned, that we don't have a real reserve to weather an economic downturn or a budget cut. And then ultimately, healthy districts that are, so to speak, going by the book, your goal ultimately is to have a 25% reserve, which for a district of our size, generally 16, last year the budget was close to 16 million. Would it be about $4 million that we should be holding in reserve? So that's just some of the takeaways from there.
Just want to point out in the 2018 year that she alluded to, slowly in 19 and then in 20, slowly digging the way back out, but nowhere near the 4 million reserve, right? And that's kind of I want you to see in the next slide the movement in the direction that we're going.
And I think for our district, it hits home because I've talked with several people. I wasn't here with the district in 2009. Basically, we had this scenario where we got this budget cut, and we weren't in a position to keep. We had layoffs. I think that probably closely aligns with the closure of Pinedale and Clay Springs. It wasn't good times.
At that time, though, I don't believe that the districts were able to have a 25% reserve. You were only allowed to have so much money. And if you had more than a certain amount of money, you had to turn it back over to the state. So they were very involved in that. And right. And you could not have a whole lot in reserve. So I was actually surprised when I saw that right now that we could have 4 million.
Yeah,
And the state would be okay with that?
It changed a couple years ago. We used to only be able to carry over 3%, and then that 3% waived. The legislature changed that a number of years ago, and so you can carry over the amount that you need.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure the year that it's changed, but since I've been here,
You're able to do so. Great. I think it's wonderful.
So going down, here's just a snapshot of the fiscal 21 budget balance. As you'll see, the budget capacity, we're close to the 16 million. Actual expenditures, we came up at 14.6, leaving a positive budget balance. And then there's the numbers for capital. the budget capacity, budget expenditures, and a small surplus. Basically, it's good that we have a budget balance in the past 5 years. And then just putting it side by side here. Obviously, we didn't cut 1.5 million in expenses. We had some things going on in the background that allowed this to happen. So we had the enrollment stability grant that I was able to go on the back end and basically plug in that number on current expenditures. ESSER 1 is similar, but that was a lot of the stuff that was required for COVID. So like the PPE, sanitation, all that extra stuff that we had to purchase to open. Definitely, that was amazing to have that money. And then I did a complete overhaul of our tuition billing. We've been severely underbilling Vernon and Concho that come to our district severely. So with those things combined, we're not at the 4 million obviously, but it's in a very much better position going forward with what's on the horizon.
I just want to note what you talked about is about billing. So in elementary school district, they get to choose a high school because they don't have a high school in their district. It's pass through money, so they take the tuition for that child, and then they are billed by the receiving high school district, and we bill tuition, and it's really a pass through, and it should be dollar for dollar. So, but I will tell you, as an elementary school district, if you're not being billed the full amount, there's no way I'm going to send it to you, right? So, if we were owed $500,000, we were billing 125. They weren't going to send us the other 400,000. They were going to use it for their, and rightfully so, perhaps. And so, in making those changes there, also already just having a change in focus with Mrs. Ramsey's position, looking at ADM from the educational side. Just the other day, we've also noticed that there are high school students right now from some of our elementary districts that we hadn't been set up to capture that money, somewhere around 24 students. And so we're getting better at identifying those, and that position that we kind of quasi-changed will help aid Ms. Beecroft in capturing the true tuition that we need from these schools.
Yeah, so going over some of the COVID relief funds, the total award, this is with ESSER 1, 2, and 3, and the enrollment stability grant was 10.4 million that the district will receive. Fiscal 20, so that was kind of just the very beginning of COVID. We expended a little over 12,000. The school year that we just completed, so fiscal 21, we had almost $1 million, and that is where, like I mentioned on the back end, I used the enrollment stability grant. Fiscal 22, so far expended and encumbered, we have a little over 1.5 million, which would put our remaining funds at around 7.8 million. One of the things that they have allowed, which is very unusual for ESSER 2 and 3, is that you can supplant. So usually that's not allowed. So if we, I know other districts are using it to go in, like transportation department total cost us nearly $1 million. You would go in and basically plug this money in to there and then free up the $1 million back to your M&O budget. So it's unusual that they're going to allow it, but I think we need to be very strategic on how we use it. It's one time that they're probably ever going to say that. So that's really awesome. And that is in talking with the consultant, Mr. Kayas, for Tolleson Unified, he's using almost all of his money to supplant. I was kind of shocked, but I don't know that we could do that. But that is what some of the bigger strategists are doing. So we'll talk a little bit about aggregate expenditures and then kind of tie it all together. Do you want to talk about this, since this was kind of your your
Yeah, this
talking
is
point that you
super
had.
fun, part of it. So the constitutional expenditure limit was put into place in the early 80s, basically limiting the amount of the general fund budget that could be expended towards education. Um, right after it was put into place, they exceeded the expenditure limit the very next year and had to vote to extend that, and they increased it 10%, I believe it was. And then there's been times throughout history where it's been come up to or exceeded, and then there's been times when they've extended or they've raised the cap, or they just denied spending above it. But there's kind of not 50-50, but there's been more times where they haven't gone above it or they have gone above it, and vice versa. One area was in particular was around Prop 301. They said in Prop 301 that they gave it an exception under the rule because Prop 301 would push it above the constitutional spending limit. Well, Prop 301, they said it's a grant, so it's not. So then now they have that sitting over here. So now here's where it gets interesting. Prop 208 just went through the legal battle, right? The judge found that it's unconstitutional because of, or because they said it's going to break the constitutional spending limit. Well, now the people that are arguing against that ruling, the appeal is, well, if you say that this is above the constitutional spending limit, the same rules that are applied for Prop 301 apply. You either have to grant it the same status, or you have to say 301 pushes you above the constitutional expenditure limit. And so they're trying to get it to quasi go into place. Regardless of that, right now the state is $400 million over the constitutional expenditure limit. I personally, you may have a different feel or flavor for it, but I personally don't think that there's any indication from the state legislature that they would be open to raising that limit. Because a lot of them have already had talking points to the fact that, well, we got all of this ESSER money, your cash flush, there you go, use it. So we're going to pull back the 400 million from all this. We're going to recapture it from all the school budget. And Vanessa's going to go over what that means, what it could mean to us. But if they do that, they're going to make that decision first part of November. It could affect us as late as March 1st. Okay, they're making that decision between 208 and Prop 301. And so we're kind of playing, kind of watch and see and seeing how this is all going to play out, because it's a pretty important game of cat and mouse that they're playing, and it affects us who have no say in it, right? So I'm just trying to see how this plays out and kind of understand where it's all coming from and where it's going to land. But that constitutional expenditure limit, and then someone might argue that, well, ESSER money says that to receive it, you couldn't reduce educational spending. But what they're going to say is, we're just going to spend to our cap. Last year, we didn't spend to our cap, so we're not reducing our educational expenditures from the previous year. And so that's kind of, I think, the arguments that are going to be posed. I don't know how they're going to be ruled, but that's where I see it. And so there's a minimum impact, and then there's a maximum worst case impact. The initial numbers were much higher. I'm glad that as we continue to dig, that they flushed out a little bit better, but they're still not pretty.
So yeah, as of this week, the existing calculation, and I'm not sure what all they're considering. Obviously, they're considering the amount of money that was awarded the district with the ESSER. The existing calculation, the minimal risk would be the 1.1 million that more than likely we're going to have to eat. The worst case scenario, which is what he just mentioned with the Prop 301, if that swings in that direction, we'll be looking at the 3.4 million, which is a lot of money to take a hit to your budget. Obviously, they're not going to feel too bad with
301.
knowing that the district's going to receive the 10.4 million, so they're expecting districts to use that to cover that.
Remember when Ms. Beekoff talks about the classroom site plan or Prop 301, she's talking about the rules that are applied to both. So they could say that the rules that they just applied to 208, apply to 301, and that would throw things for a loop. Or they could say that the rules that applied to 301 apply to 208, and therefore 208 is constitutional. So it's outside of the constitutional expenditure limits. That might be the best case scenario for us, but we'll have to wait and see what.
So either one, I mean, those are big numbers. The worst case scenario, in talking with the consultant, he feels that everything's lining up to be prepared for that. So we'll prepare for that. We'll hope for not, but that kind of puts a damper on our plans using the ESSER money, because our district desperately needs capital to do upgrades to the buildings, to get the new buses. But I mean, this is the reality, that we're probably going to have to use it to cover what is cut from the budget. A lot of it, not all of it.
Is that worst case scenario? That's just for this year, and it could happen in upcoming years as well?
That would be for this budget year, yeah. And then with some of the other things that are out there, inflation is just outrageous. There's supply chain interruptions. I mean, it's, we order things and we're waiting months and months. So it's really hard.
Mr. To your question though, any fiscal year the state has there is the likelihood that the state exceeds the constitutional expenditure limit. They don't always get to that point, but years like especially when economy is really good, there's chances. When stimulus dollars come in like now, there's chances. When they put in new taxation for educational spending specifically, there's chances. So, but we hope to avoid all those. But this year, this would be the impact just for this.
Right, and so that kind of comes back to the supplanting that I was talking about. We would have to use that money and plug it in where it's needed. Like we've talked about several times, is based on the history of the district, we've been using our capital budget, even though it was slashed by the state, we've been still using that money and moving it to M&O, which is not a good practice. Right. But I think for fiscal 21, it ended up, it was approximately $550,000. So like we have things to look at to stop that from happening, because this is kind of a perfect storm. Like, because we received all these things, the enrollment stability grant, ESSER 1, to kind of plug in for this year. So we ended up with a 1.5 million surplus, but that won't repeat right. Next year. So we can't like base any decisions off of that. So
so what is your recommendation? Should we not spend that 3.4 million and kind of just hang on to it to see what the results will be, or what would you recommend?
So that's kind of what we've kind of put in place right now. Is obviously we want, like, each site or each department, if they have their top priority for ESSER, we really want to try and meet that. But it's my recommendation, that's kind of what I've set out, is that we kind of just need to put it on hold. I mean, we're allowed to spend the money through 2024. So I think it would be very wise and prudent to kind of put it on hold. There's, like I said, there's already 1.5 million that we've already expended or encumbered this year, not knowing that all this was in the works. Some districts have spent all. So
are you suggesting maybe giving each school site a certain amount of money, and they can determine how they want to prioritize and spend that money, or how?
I think that's the general feel. We'll go back to the drawing board and say, okay, now that we know we don't get it all to like go spend, go back and see like what are like the top
priorities, top
needs. I would really like to do those.
Right.
But also reserve.
Still a lot of money.
It still right. Could be a lot of money. The sites are considering what their priorities are. My mouth is dry, but yeah, they've been looking at them. We bring it up in our meetings on a weekly basis. Hey, just remember, just start to look at what those priorities are. I know they're working with their teams. They're trying to pick it apart. I really appreciate their thoughtfulness in it. Really trying to, what's most impactful? What do I need? And I think they're taking it serious. I hope that it doesn't play out. I would also just like to just put in there when she talks about the ability to supplant and use this maybe for other budgetary things. If it flushes out where it works out for us, this is a great time. We could walk away through the end of this fiscal year with our operational reserves at 25% and then be moving forward into future fiscal years
Right.
in a good place with that. And so that's something to consider as we go forward and try to figure out, we want to be fiscally responsible. We want to be solvent. We want to be buffered for catastrophic happenings. And so can we leverage some of the ESSER money in that way to provide us with some financial stability moving forward instead of, and maybe set aside some of the needs, put off today and then maybe get it tomorrow kind of thing.
Exactly. I hope that we will save the money and not spend it. And then once we know where we're going to be at, just keep it like at 3 mil or 3.4 or whatever, and then
Right.
let everybody get some of their needs taken care of, though they should, they should receive some of that money and
Right.
they should be able to spend some of that money. I was talking about when you were talking about people when they leave and we need to have money set aside. I know, I think the city actually, you have to kind of give notice, like 6 months in advance or a year in advance, so that they can properly prepare their budget and set aside that money so that they are ready for that when that person retires after, 10, 20 years or whatever. So maybe that's something we can implement in the district, asking people to give us plenty of notice so we can.
Something similar to that would be at least a nice budgeting tool that would be helpful. There's always the unknowns who are, last minute leaves or
Right.
change of mind, but that's not going to be as impactful as everyone that left out.
Because I know sometimes that's a big chunk of change that they're walking away with, and to be able to properly budget for that, that would be wonderful. So,
Yeah, and in years past, there was no budgeting for that. And a lot of our staff have been here a number of years, retired last year, and came back through ESI. But yeah, it's definitely something that we have to keep in our mind because, as like he mentioned, every employee that we have accrues leave. And one thing that I'm working through with the auditors right now is we have to be able to fund that liability. It's a lot of money. So there's going to be a lot of discussion on that coming forward. Like what, because I don't know when's the last time we looked at the leave plan, even though it's very, very generous. I don't know that the district will be able to carry forward because it's such a big liability,
Yeah,
dollar wise.
The board's breached that conversation a couple times over the last couple of years. The hang up has been the grandfathering piece. And so we've got to really dive in and look at what that is, because covering the liabilities of our current plan it's tough. But we have to have a plan one way or the other, right?
Right.
So one side or the other has to be.
So that kind of wraps that up. And just to Kelly's point, so that is kind of our tentative plan right now, unless next week we get some more news. Yeah, we're kind of trying to put everything on hold. Definitely going to regroup. That's like even with the buses, we're going to regroup. Do we need 10? See what that feel is. But ultimately, I think our district is in a good spot compared to where we were last year, even a couple years ago. With, unfortunately, I guess COVID actually bought us a little time to get our house in order. So
thank you very much, Vanessa.
you're welcome.
I wanted to point out too that annually there is that, she's put on her last page there is that annual or semi-annual revision, the December revision. I'm interested to see what the 40-day count comes back from the state. I'm kind of on pins and needles trying to figure out what that's going to be and anticipate. If we budgeted too high and our numbers are low, then we'll have to adjust our budget down. I don't right now don't get the sense that that's where we're at. I feel like we budgeted just right, and we saw an increase of students, so we should be okay. Now, remember, we can't adjust our budget up. They don't allow that anymore. They did used to back in the day, Kelly. They
Mhm,
used to let
back
us
in the
go
day.
up, but they didn't let us carry anything over. So
Right.
I guess that was the
But
downfall.
make sure you spent it all.
Change.
So with that, the 2021 annual financial report for your approval.
I will motion to approve the 2021 annual financial report as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any further discussion? Motion passes. Item 8.1 through 8.5 consent agenda, Mrs. Beecroft.
So for your review and approval, we have 8.1, the ratification of expense vouchers, 8.2, the ratification of payroll vouchers, 8.3, the approval of the PTSO Booster Club financials, and 8.4, the approval of the governing board minutes for last month's meeting, September 16th, as well as the September 24th special meeting. And 8.5, the approval of the donations. Mr.
Sure, I'll read them. The recommendation that we accept Cal Ranch donated $20 gift card to the high school volleyball team. APS Supply, my class, donated $500 to Miss Hostler's self-contained class at the high school. Pepsi donated $500 to the parent-teacher meet and greet held on 9/23/2021. Haven Health donated $1,000 to the Sholo High School basketball team for banner and T-shirt sponsorships. Safeway donated $100 to the Sholo High School self-contained programs annual Thanksgiving feast. Sholo Ford donated $200 to the Sholo High School self-contained program annual feast. Hatch Toyota donated $100 to the Sholo High School self-contained programs annual Thanksgiving feast. APS again donated $500 to Ms. Tomlinson's class for classroom supplies. Ms. Bigos donated 7 books from the book fair to the junior high library, and the following donations were made to the junior high by donor choose. Miss LeBou's class received clean and sanitized classroom project, Miss Murray's acrylic pour please projects, Mrs. Ford's flexible seating and workstation projects, and Miss McMillan PBIS rewards project, and the Phoenix Mental Health and Wellness donated $250 to the high school basketball team. And with that, I'll motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 9.1, motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Let me get your signature.
CC.